In this knife talk video, we're going to be talking about this knife. This is a Great Cutlery Titty number 36 Sunfish and carved pumpkin bone. And it's a cool knife for a couple of reasons. And the main one for me is that I actually saw some in person at a rendezvous a few years back, but I've never actually held or gotten to really check out one of these number 36 Sunfish patterns. So the Sunfish pattern is basically an oversized equal end. So you can see that the two ends are equal. It's not a sleeve board because a sleeve board is one end is a little smaller, but it is an equal end with rounded bolsters on both sides, and kind of like a fatter version of maybe the 54 that the Great Eastern Cutlery does, or something like that. It is a larger slip joint for sure. So first off, someone kind of asked how big it was or wasn't sure. So I have a few knives to compare it with. One that a lot of people know is the Case full-size trapper. So you can see that it's bigger than the Case full-size trapper. It's maybe about the same length, maybe slightly shorter in total length than the Case full-size trapper, but it's a lot taller, and even with a single spring, it's a little bit wider, I'd say. Another good comparison here is a Great Eastern Cutlery number 15. So this is probably the best known Great Eastern Cutlery pattern. You can see that it's a lot smaller than the 36. The 36 is definitely bigger in pretty much every way, even with one spring. This is a one spring 15 also, but the 36 is significantly bigger. Now, to compare it to another Great Eastern Cutlery knife that probably a lot of people watching this have seen, because they just did a run of them and also a couple special knives, is the Great Eastern Cutlery, give me just a second, Great Eastern Cutlery number 46 Whaler. So I got that right? This is the 46. Where's the tag stamp? I'm pretty sure that it's 46. Oh, that thing's hard to open. Yep, 46. So this is the 46 Whaler. And boy, this one is a bear to open. I'm actually going to take it up next time I go to Titusville and see if they can lighten that pull a little bit. But you can see that the Whaler is bigger than the 36 by quite a bit. Even the smaller bolster on the Whaler is wider than both bolsters on the Sunfish. And it's a thicker knife, a taller knife because of that really big spear point blade. So this is kind of on the way other end. This is definitely a big knife for a slip joint. This is a ridiculously big knife for a slip joint. But to put these away, one thing that I really like about this knife is the bone. So this is carved pumpkin bone, and I think that it's a similar die job to some of the other bones that Great Eastern Cutlery does, like the recent, I think that they called it golden jig bone or something like that on the recent 99 run. It has that kind of deep orange golden color, or deep orange in the center with gold around the edge, almost down to a yellow, and it's a really nice autumn leaf or something like that was what they called it. But it's a really nice bone color. And then rather than the style of jigging that they had on those 99s, this is kind of a crosshatch type pattern. And I like this style of jigging. I think that it's a nice looking style of jigging. It's pretty deep jigged, and I think that it looks good. It does remind me of the color of pumpkin, and that's what it's called. Now, another thing about this knife is that it's a serialized knife. So Great Eastern Cutlery doesn't do a huge number. You can see that it's pretty shiny right now. It's an unused knife, uncarried, unused. Great Eastern Cutlery doesn't do a whole lot of serialized knives anymore. In their earlier days, they did a lot of serialized knives. And you can see that this was a run of 50 knives, so it's one of 50, but its actual serial number is etched into the bolster, and it's number 32 of 50. So that's another thing that they don't do a whole lot anymore that's a nice touch. I'm actually not aesthetically a fan of the etched number or the etched blade with 1 of 50. I think that it's a little bit of a collector gimmick. Not that there's anything wrong with being a collector, but I think that it does kind of overcomplicate or make the aesthetics of the knife a little bit busy. It just doesn't need it, but I think that from a collector standpoint, it is something that's kind of cool. So I don't love the look of the 32 etched on or the 1 of 50, but from a collecting standpoint and the history of GEC standpoint, it is kind of cool. Now another thing with this knife is that its full model number is 362208. So it's the 36 pattern. Its main blade is a spear point blade, which I'll show you in a second, and it has 2 blades, and it was made in 08. But it looks like from the certificate of authenticity, which came in the tube, which is another thing that they don't do very often at all, if at all anymore. I don't think that they've done these for a long time. But this is the certificate of authenticity, and it's signed by Christine Tucker. You can see that it says pattern number is 362208, but this knife was actually produced in January of 2009. So that's kind of cool because the year of the pattern number doesn't match with the year of production. It was actually produced at the end of January. So kind of an interesting little discrepancy there. But to talk about the blade shape, and this is an early knife, so you can see from that this is early in GEC's history. They started in 2006, but really didn't do much production until 2007. So this is about 2 years into their existence. Now, like I said, this is a 2-blade knife. It is a pen-style multi-blade knife in the sense that there's a main blade on one end and a secondary blade on the other end. The main blade, like I said, is a spear point, and this is a nice spear point blade. It's a pretty thick, tall, wide spear point blade. It has, lots of straight edge and then a pretty classic spear type belly towards the point. You can see that it has the Titty Cutlery etch on the front there, which is fine. I prefer no etch, but Titty Cutlery isn't a bad one. And then the secondary is a pen blade, but this is definitely a thick, chubby pen blade. It really, to me, looks more like a short spear point blade, but I think technically you would call this a pen blade. Really, really thinly ground. This would be a really great slicer. Super thinly ground, actually, but kind of an interesting blade shape because it is more, to my eye, a mini spear point than a real pen blade. But the blades fit together really well. And another thing that's interesting about this knife is you saw on the whaler from the Rendezvous that I had out, super tough pulls. The muscle bone whaler that I had from that run, super tough pull. Like the Rendezvous whaler is like a 8 on the main blade and a 9.5 on the pen blade. The pen blade on the other whaler I had was like a 10. Now, I have another whaler from the Allegheny Mountain Knife Club that is a little bit easier to open, but nowhere near as easy as this. So it's actually really nice. Rather than having super difficult pulls that are barely openable, that make the knives not really that useful for actually carrying and using, this knife is easy to open. So it's about, I would say, a 5, maybe 5.5 on that main blade. And then on the secondary blade, it's probably a 4.5 or a 5. It does get a little tougher there towards the end. But really, really nice. I like that. I like that better than the super strong pulls, and it makes it more of a usable knife. So it comes together for a really nice knife. There's really no issues. There's no gaps. Everything is well pinned. No big, transition errors or anything. And again, just a really well-made knife from early in Great Eastern Cutlery's history. The Titty shield is something that I really don't mind. I think that it's, I've heard the name Titty for a long time because I grew up relatively close to there, and it's a name in the oil and gas industry that I'd heard. So I like that too, and it all comes together for a really classic large Sunfish pattern that I'm really happy to have gotten. I got this in a trade recently, and it's one that I'm glad to have gotten to check out a 36 pattern in person. If you have any questions or comments about this knife, I'd be certainly interested to hear them. I saw after, when I was looking up the 36, that they made a Christmas 36, and I thought that was really cool. I'd love to see one if you have one, or if you can point me to the direction of any videos on them. But also, if you enjoyed the video, please like it, and if you'd like to get notifications for other videos that I post, you can subscribe, and also check out the rest of the videos in my channel. I've got a whole lot of videos of all kinds of different knives, ones that are still in my collection, ones that I've traded or sold, and I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and don't forget to go out and do good.